we okay? Okay.
We're good.
Okay. So we will now begin our Wellness Wednesday. Okay. So good morning, JNG, and welcome back to another Wellness Wednesday. And I'm very happy and glad to be back here with you after a long hiatus or break.
Super happy to have you back, Jello.
Thank
Like
you, Miss Chico.
we're so happy that you are well and everything, and we're glad that you're here with us again.
Right, right. God has been very good, no? And uh, so much I've learned from the past few weeks, and I think I'd like to share that the next time with the group, no, when given the chance. So I'm happy to be here, happy to be back, and excited for this Wednesday's webinar. So uh, last Wednesday, we talked about generosity with Miss Ilsa. We talked about how important it is for us to be selfless, to be giving, to be generous, especially during this difficult time, no. And for this Wellness Wednesday, we will discuss how to be compassionate, but this time through a psychological perspective. After all, our theme for this month of August is Christitude. So, let me read to you the definition of Christitude once again to jog your memory. So, Christitude is our authentic choice to be spiritually Christ-like in our opportune way of life, for servitude and stewardship, with compassion, in thinking with our hearts and feeling with our minds, for our love and light to radiate together for others, celebrating and bearing witness to the love of Christ, and to genuinely answer his call and will to love joyfully. No? And once again, we are very happy to have Miss Joy, Miss Joy Umandap today to talk about our pursuit for a selfless and compassionate mindset. So she's no longer a stranger to all of us. We're all very familiar with her. She's a friend to us, no, one of our Suke speakers. But to refresh your memory, just to remind you, Miss Jofel Umandap is a licensed counseling psychologist and part-time lecturer at the psychology department of the Ateneo de Manila University. So, since 2015, she has been working at the Ateneo Bulatao Center for Psychological Services, which provides counseling, therapy, assessment, training, and workshops and research services to enhance psychological wellness. So we're very excited to begin our webinar today. And I'd like to call on our speaker, Miss Joey Umandap. Good morning, Miss Joey.
Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Chico. Good morning, Jello. Good morning to the panelists and everyone. Thanks for having me again.
Glad to have you, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing much better, Jello, as well. So
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
so I'll start sharing the screen now. We're going to talk about selflessness and compassion in difficult times. Like, how can we share of ourselves to others, given that we're all under the rain, right? How do we keep each other from getting wet, not just ourselves? So moving on to the next slide, I'll just give you a brief overview of the topics. We'll talk about compassion, definitely. There's the research behind it, the flow of compassion, and how it works in our bodies and what blocks it. Cultivating compassion, how can we train ourselves to be more compassionate? And then we have to talk about the context that we're in, how evil can happen, and everyday heroism as well. So for the next slide, this is basically the definition of compassion. The Dalai Lama is quoted on it, but a lot of researchers actually refer to it as well. Compassion is sensitivity to the suffering of self and others with a commitment to try to relieve it. So it's not just the cognitive and affective component that we're talking about. There's actually a motivation to do something about it, to alleviate suffering. So there's an action component. And when you translate it from its word origins, it comes from the Latin word compati, which means to suffer with. So compassion is not just a feeling of empathy. It's also being able to do something about it. It's also a reaction to it. So if we move towards the next slide, when you see this image, right? A lot of you're familiar with this, and the next image, and the next image, it will engender certain emotions in you, right? So move on to the next slide. It sort of illustrates the flow or what happens with empathy, compassion, and distress. So when we see images like that sort of tug at us, our reaction is either to feel compassion or to be compassionate. So it's a more other related emotion and motivation. It engenders positive feelings because it leads towards pro-social motivation. So what happens is we turn outside of ourselves and extend the helping hand. From that feeling inside us, we want to do something to alleviate it. However, some of us in certain situations are not always able to feel that compassion. Instead, we feel personal distress, right? So there's that image, we see that, and then either we do not have the capacity for it at that moment, or else we shut down. I mean, not all of us are able to feel compassion all the time, right? Sometimes we feel distress. It's called empathic distress. We feel the empathy, we shut down, we turn off. You might notice that in certain people, instead of being able to help out, they tend towards fear because there's a tendency to want to protect yourself instead of reaching out. So it's more self-related. It tends to engender more negative feelings, and there's withdrawal and isolation. We would like to detach from that disturbing emotion, from that feeling of empathy. And it has been found in research so many times that compassion and well-being is actually associated and positively related. So the more compassionate you can feel, the more compassionate you can become, the more well-being there is, the person feels. And this is measured by levels of stress, levels of depression, and levels of anxiety. And they also notice that there's a social context. And this is important because later on it becomes it comes to light. But certain people in certain situations tend to be more compassionate. They did a research on colleges in the US, and they found that students who were in social sciences and humanities courses tended to be more compassionate compared to students from the management, commerce fields, and engineering fields. Not that they were less good as people, it's just that that was the situation they were in. The environment they were in enabled them to be more compassionate. So moving on to the next slide. How does compassion flow then? How does compassion work? The Compassionate Mind Foundation says that there's actually a flow of compassion within us. There is self-compassion, which we have talked about. There is compassion from others, and there is compassion for others. And as I mentioned earlier, compassion is cultivated in families. What are the values that families teach? What are the values that the schools inculcate in children and in organizations and institutions? What are the policies in place that enable compassion? Do they make people want to be more competitive or more compassionate and collaborative? So that factors into it a lot. And this flows, they notice that while they can occur separately, we can be self-compassionate and not really extend compassion from others, it tends to be more stilted. So somehow, even if some people find it easier to extend care to others as opposed to receiving care or even being kind to themselves. However, even if that's possible, there's a threshold. So what happens is, if you're too kind to others, you won't have any left for yourself, right? That's what happens. So it's constraining because you run out eventually. However, if you can engage in compassionate practices for yourself, for others, and also receiving it from others, it allows it to flow and it engenders a more compassionate self. So now we'll talk about the blocks to compassion, which is on the next slide. I won't go over it into research terms, but then perhaps in more layman terms, these are the blocks to receiving compassion. You either think you don't deserve it, you don't believe in receiving care from others, you feel you'll be patronized, it's a condescending feeling, you'll feel indebted or dependent, you feel it will make you vulnerable, or you'll also tend to think they'll use this against me. They'll help me now, but they'll use this against me later on. And these are some blocks to receiving compassion. The next slide talks about some blocks to extending compassion. And the thought process or the thoughts that are associated with this is that are that people will take advantage of me if I give too much. I will never get it back. I give of myself, they'll ask for I'll give an arm, they'll ask for my leg. People will become too dependent on me, and there's also the belief that people should be independent and autonomous. They should take care of themselves. They're adults now. Some other blocks would manifest as people thinking I'll feel resentful if I give too much, or if I give, I won't have enough for myself. So just sort of ask yourself, what are my blocks whenever I decide or not decide to extend help, right? And then when it comes to blocks to being self-compassionate, which is on the next slide, what some of the things we tell ourselves or believe is that I don't deserve it. If I'm self-compassionate, I'm being selfish and self-centered. Others' needs are more important. When I'm self-compassionate, I let myself off the hook. I don't make myself accountable. Or self-compassion leads to self-pity. I'll just end up wallowing. Some people believe that self-compassion is weak, soft, and fluffy. You know, it's a psych thing about emotions. Yeah, I don't want that. And then other will say it's too hard or overwhelming. I'm not capable of being kind to myself, right? So these are some of the blocks to self-compassion according to research. And if we move on to the next slide, we have to now think, if these are all my blocks, what do I now aspire towards in order to navigate these blocks, right? First, we bring to mind a compassionate person. According to the Compassionate Mind Foundation, if you cultivate compassion, you also cultivate these qualities, or these are the qualities you can cultivate in yourself. There's wisdom, because it helps us make better choices that acknowledge our limitations, yet still allow us to grow beyond our comfort zone. There's warmth. It's more of a feeling or attitude that people feel towards us because they sense this through our verbals and nonverbals. I guess our way of being, right? There's strength, because there is fortitude, courage, and also perseverance to acknowledge and heal suffering, because we see, okay, there is suffering, what can I do about it? It takes strength to keep on acknowledging those on a regular basis, to keep on making choices that you feel are not just only kind to yourselves, but also kind to others. And then there's also responsibility. There's a sense of accountability that you have to deal with these problems, and that you have commitments not just to yourselves, but for others. And sometimes these are conflicting responsibilities, right? So it's a manage of balancing that and finding a way to really uplift all of these, and just basically make that decision to be kind, not just to yourself, but also to others. So these are the qualities. And moving on to the next slide, how do we do that, right? According to research, we can learn. There are brain-based research, there are actually brain changes that happen when people are more compassionate, and you can train. It's not just learning a new skill, it's actually learning a new trait, new quality. You can build on these according to research. Behavioral reports would also suggest, okay, they did notice a change. People learn to be more compassionate. And also self-reports, people notice that they were being more compassionate with compassionate mind training. And there are a lot of techniques that are available even online. A lot of them are evidence-based, and a lot of Psychology Today, Simply Well Mind, Greater Good Science Center, the Positive Psychology Foundation. There's a lot of research online that can help us train our minds to be more compassionate. I'll be talking about some of them, and the first one is on the next slide. It is before I do that, sorry, I guess the logic behind the compassionate mind training is that we turn off the threat system. Because if you go back to the blocks that you experience, a lot of those underlying those thoughts and beliefs is a sense of fear. It's like a threat orientation. And then we learn as we get older from our experiences that there's certain situations that are not safe. So we want to protect ourselves. And then we learn behaviors that make us want to protect ourselves. It's like learning to lock the car, locking the door, always checking your back, making sure you don't walk in dark places, those things. It's learned behaviors. And it's a way of dealing with a sense of being unsafe. Now, when we feel current threat, and this is related when it comes to doing good or wanting to do good for others, we feel threat. Say you're in the car, you're driving, and then there's you notice that you're late. If you're self-critical, there's shame, right? So you're gonna get mad at yourself. Why did I wake up late again? Why did I forgot to prepare my things on time because my boss called me so late, and it's like there's not only shame, but there's self-critical and critical of others' dialogue, and it maintains it. It becomes a cycle if we feel that threat. However, if we engage in self-soothing dialogues or compassionate imagery, whether it's kindness to ourselves or to others, we engender feelings of compassion and safeness. So we turn off the threat system. Remember the amygdala and our response to threat. Instead of allowing the amygdala to act or to act up, to always light up, we release endorphins and oxytocin in our system, and it makes us feel safer. In that sense, we mitigate the sense of threat, and that it ends the cycle of threat, and we now feel more safe, more able to help out and extend the helping hand. Because more often than not, when we refuse to help others, refuse to open the window or share of ourselves, it's basically because we would rather feel safe alone. And now imagine how a lot of us are locking ourselves inside our houses, not letting anyone in. And sometimes we do it to the point of excluding others, even being mean, being like exclusive, because we want to protect ourselves. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's necessary, but sometimes it can border on being non-compassionate or not compassionate. If we move on to the next slide, how do we do this, right? This is a practice you can do at home. It's called compassionate self-imagery. So think of a time when you gave or accepted compassion. Close your eyes, and then you can hold your hand to your heart, and you can ask yourself these questions. We won't go over it now, but you'll be getting these slides anyway. You can just sort of think, if I were compassionate, imagine in yourself, what thoughts might I have? What would I focus on? What memories would I recall? What would my motivation be? How would being compassionate feel in my body? How would I feel towards myself? How would I be relating to others? How would I be behaving? It's like sort of method acting, sort of imbibing the qualities that you feel a compassionate person might have. Imagining yourself being compassionate, and then moving, thinking, behaving, and acting that way. And with practice, it helps. This actually helps. Now, assuming that we tried that, if we move to the next slide, some people find it difficult. And if we go back to the previous things we learned, when research found that the threat system, the amygdala, is designed to overprotect us sometimes, particularly when we're anxious or feeling unsafe. So we have to give ourselves time and support. Also, some people might find that difficult because our mind tends to wander. So instead of being able to imagine yourself as compassionate, you think of other things. Mindfulness would help in this regard. We also tend to believe our inner critic, it's out of habit. So you're like, okay, I'm not really being kind. I'm being fake. This is not authentic. I'm not like this. I'm normally like, less compassionate. And then we try to learn self-compassion. And that is also mindfulness, just being kind and also being more connecting with others. And then some people might find it difficult because it's difficult to imagine. It's such a fuzzy image in their head. It's so hazy. Take your time and experiment. Some of us resonate more with certain images. Some of us can't imagine ourselves being like the kind, nurturing mother because of gender. We're male, or we don't talk like that. We don't think like that. So then we adapt it. How would a man be compassionate? How would imagine like another male you can bring to mind who would be compassionate? Experiment. Try different imagery, try different words, try different actions and verbals and non-verbals. Another would be a fixed mindset. This is how I am. Ganito na talaga ako eh. And this is when we have to realize that, we are works in progress and we need to develop a growth mindset. So that's some of the ways to overcome that block, particularly when it comes to practicing this exercise. Another technique that they have found to be helpful is on the next slide. It's a self-compassion break. So it's composed of 5 steps. The first is that noticing you're under stress emotionally, noticing where you feel the emotional discomfort in your body, and then acknowledging that this is a moment of struggle. Or saying, ouch, this hurts. I'm going through a tough time. I can feel it in my chest. Kinakabahan ako. Or parang ang bigat ng damdamin ko. And then you acknowledge that you're part of common humanity. Okay, it's only natural for me to feel this. Minsan mahirap talaga. Or parang there are certain situations that are really difficult to carry. It's part of life. And then you put your hands over your heart or wherever you need to feel soothed. And then sense that warmth and safety from your hands. This is the oxytocin being released from your body. And then you tell yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself what I need. Or may I have the strength to get through this difficult time. So this is a 5-step process. First, acknowledge the discomfort in your body. Be mindful of the situation. Acknowledge your common humanity. Put your heart where it needs to be, put your hand over the place where it needs to be soothed, and then say something kind to yourself. And if you have a tough time doing this, imagine what a dear friend would tell you, and then try adopting the words they would say. So if we go to the next slide, this is what happens when we exercise more self-compassion or practice more self-compassion. We now address fear, shame, and vulnerability. Because when we become too selfish, the tendency is we always put ourselves on top. We prioritize ourselves, sometimes our family's needs above everyone else, right? Mine first. And because of fear and extending compassion, there is also shame. So we feel shameful. Instead of acknowledging it though, we deny it, we suppress it. So we stuff it under the rug and say, me, I need to be more important. The shame is suppressed. When we're too selfless, the tendency is shame is expressed because as opposed to selfishness, we now lack regard for ourselves and we put others first. So we tend to say, okay, others are more important than me. I'm not enough. They have to be put ahead. In that regard, fear is also playing a role. And this time, we express ourselves too much in that we lessen ourselves, we constrain ourselves and put more importance on others. When we're self-compassionate now, because we feel safe in ourselves, we can be more compassionate towards others and it's more authentic. We feel safe, we can reach our hand out and then keep it out there, maintain that sense of safety, not just for ourselves, but also for others. So we balance the needs. And if we move on to the next slide, once we become aware that we're struggling, I think you remember this from the previous talk, the self-compassion allows us to activate our self-soothing system. And the sense of safety and courage allows us the courage to move on and also affect the changes we need from ourselves. This is actually an image from a K-drama, which I feel is like something a lot of people should watch because it addresses mental health so well. And this is sort of the butterfly hug. It teaches a lot of people how to be safe, to feel safe in their own skin, and in that sense, perhaps change and then help others. So if we move to the next slide, what happens after that, right? What next? Self-compassion and also compassion is key, learning those things, because when we're able to be gentle on ourselves in the midst of shame and even fear and threat, we're more likely to reach out, connect, and experience empathy. So when we experience empathy and we're coming from that place of self-compassion, we can be more compassionate towards others instead of feeling distressed, because we have enough compassion to give. And then if we move on to the next slide, it's a call to care, basically, given the context that we're in. Given the COVID, the pandemic, extending compassion, being more self-compassionate, receiving compassion is a call for all of us. If you notice, in therapy and in care providing, whether it's physical therapy, social care, a lot of healthcare professions, part of their role is to instill hope and to provide care by strengthening and the soothing system. So it's teaching others how to feel safe, right? If you notice, our doctors, the nurses, it's also that bedside manner that allows them to feel safe and comforted. It's not just the skill and techniques. It's providing that sense of safety. In PFA and other community intervention programs, establishing a sense of safety is very important because it helps in assuring compliance and support. So when people feel safe, they tend to follow rules more. But if people feel threatened, they tend to go their own way. They tend to like revolt, right? They tend to go against what's necessary, which is why it's very necessary to address first the basic needs. Do you have enough food? Do you have shelter? Do you have accommodations? Do you feel safe? If once they feel safe, they can now move. People can move together, move forwards. In the corporate setting, compassionate leaders are called for because when you have your staff's trust and support, when you're emotionally invested in them, then you can build more authentic connections. Then you can lead them better because they will follow you, because they will trust you, they will feel safe with you. So safety requires solidarity. And now more than ever, right, we feel that none of us are really safe until everyone is safe. And if we move on to the next slide, how do we practice compassion on a day-to-day basis? We have strategies that can help us. First, we connect with others. Reach out. First, we connect with ourselves. We connect with a loved one. We connect with someone we're not so close to. And perhaps we can connect with someone we even dislike, right? Not just a stranger, but someone we even dislike. We try to love the unlovable. Practice that. Practice connecting with those people, understanding them, talking to them, relating with them, understanding where they're coming from. And then next, be mindful, not just of yourself, but also of others, but also of the situation. What is going on? What is needed of me at this moment, right? Particularly now, stress levels are really high. People are all trying to hold that umbrella while carrying the box, right? And some of them have children under the umbrella. How do they prevent their children and the box from getting wet? How do they prevent themselves from getting wet? Notice that a lot of people are really trying to harness their efforts into getting through this. And being mindful of that helps you extend care when it's needed and helps you perhaps give yourself care when you need it more. And lastly, be grateful. Always wonder at whatever like the world is still offering us. There's still the sun, there is still rain, which, you notice the grass, notice the sky, notice the moon, things like that. Just take nature in and appreciate that there's still life. We still have life. And these are just some strategies that we can adopt on a daily basis to train ourselves to be more compassionate. And the next slide now talks about this. This is an image not from the Philippines, but from Pakistan, from the Middle East. And then when we asked ourselves during this pandemic, do they feel safe? Right? We know how to feel safe. We have those compassionate mind practices. A lot of us are privileged enough to have our jobs still, to be secure when it comes to financial matters. But what about everyone else? Do they feel safe? And why is it important to discuss this? If there is a lot of people in this world that we're living in who feel unsafe, imagine how that trickles down. What are the consequences for the rest of the world? As I said in the previous slide, there's a lot of people are saying now, none of us are safe until all of us are safe. So if that is their day-to-day prior to the pandemic, what is their day-to-day now? And if we move on to the next slide, we have to dig deeper. If we want to talk and address mental health issues, we really have to go beyond the medical model, dig deeper, and talk about the systemic issues that abound. There's discrimination, inequality, classism, injustice. And I think this goes beyond just psychology. It's social psychology, not just the counseling psychology, which I talk about a lot. But if we really want to address mental health issues, we also have to be aware of the underlying systemic issues, right? And it's important to talk about evil, which the next slide talks about. Because if we go back to history and talk about something more extreme to highlight the ideas that I'd like to put forward. By the way, most of these slides came from an Israeli psychologist named Dr. Berger. He shared a lot of these when he visited the Philippines in 2015 to talk about trauma, which we're all experiencing now, and what we can do collectively as a nation to deal with it. And he says we have to talk about evil because it's the flip side of compassion. It's the other side of goodness. It's something that we want to avoid, right? We have to be aware of that. And if you think about it, would you consider all of these people evil? We're all Germans evil. It's hard to fathom, right? If you go to the next slide now, there's this famous picture of one man who was not doing the Sig Heil or like the Heil Hitler when everyone else was. And it's when we see an image like this, certain social psychology research concepts come to mind. Number one, the power of anonymity. People tend to be, over time, people will tend to be less compassionate if they're threatened, if their face is covered. Certain experiments will show you this. Diffusion of social responsibility. The more people there are, the less responsible they will feel for any wrongdoing happening around them. And there's also mob mentality, groupthink, and conformity. If everyone else is doing it, it's easier to follow the bandwagon, right? It's easier to get on that and just follow suit. Status quo, it's better than ano. And there's also this experiment that they came up with, which drew out the bystander effect. In New York, there was this one woman who was screaming, she died, no one helped her. And it caused researchers to think then, why? There were so many people who could have helped her. It's because of the diffusion of social responsibility. There were so many people around her, none of them helped. But the moment one person got up and helped, and so certain researchers they made, the 10%, if one person got up and helped, the tendency is other people would also extend help. But it takes one person to stand up to do that. And that's a bystander effect. So if we move now, let's fast forward towards this. Where does evil come from? And Zimbardo talks about 3 types of evil, of 3 sources of evil. The first is there are certain people that were perhaps born evil. It's called dispositional evil. Perhaps Hitler was born evil. We don't know. Perhaps certain serial killers were born evil. They were bad apples. But there's also a bad barrel. Certain situations can cause people to be evil, right? When you think of sexual harassment, when you think of bullying in schools, sometimes it's the situation that caused them to be evil. And it's not just the bullies, that did bad, it's also the people who didn't stand up to the bully. It's the people who kept quiet while the bullying was happening, right? And then there is also the bad barrel maker, or the systemic issues. These are now the policies that we have in place, organizational rules that that influence the situation. So when we look at, say, I'm not sure if you follow US politics, but what's happening in the US now, right? Capitalism, that's the system there. It's influencing all these policies, all these profit organizations to really think more of themselves than others. So it's causing more racism, causing more classism, and there's more fear. And this is the broadly influence on basically systemic things in place that can cause evil. So if you see all of these acting together, this is why I guess evil is perpetuated. Some people are evil, some people don't speak up, and certain systems allow this evil to happen. So if you move now to the next slide, these are what Zimbardo calls actions that grease the slippery slope of evil. Zimbardo is the researcher behind the Stanford Prison Experiment during 1970. So what happened then was, I'll explain it later pala. I'll talk about this first, just so we become aware. I think it's important that we become aware that when we engage in these, or when we take part in these actions, we are actually going towards that slope. We're going down. First, taking that first small step, saying, it doesn't matter, this is small. Parang when it comes to bribing people, just making sure you get preferential treatment, that's one small step. And you take a lot of small steps such as these, and it leads towards that, right? Dehumanization of others. When we call other names, we tend to think of them as, we call people names. We say, basura yan, wala siyang kwenta, addict yan. It's sort of like you're dehumanizing them. You're taking out that these people are also capable of good things. When there's anonymity, particularly in the online setting now, bullying, cyberbullying is still happening because a lot of people are more anonymous. Diffusion of personal responsibility. If a lot of people are part of it or are in on it, they feel less responsible. Blind obedience to authority. Those people just say yes, yes, yes. Uncritical conformity to group norms. Sometimes, okay, everyone's wearing purple, everyone's wearing pink, so everyone else who's not wearing pink is not part of the group. It creates out groups and in groups. So certain people are in, everyone else is out. And that causes disparity, that causes inequality. It helps perpetuate evil. And there's also passive tolerance of evil through inaction or indifference, when we become desensitized to the injustices going on around us. And if you move on to the next step, or the next slide, we'll look at this is Milgram's obedience experiment. A lot of psych major knows this. I think Jello's very well familiar with this. There's a fake test subject who will pretend to feel pain. And the subject will be told, he's the actual subject, but he doesn't know he's the subject. He'll say that you have to teach the fake test subject something. If he doesn't learn it, you have to administer a shock. So and so a lot of psychologists said, okay, he will not administer the shock because that's painful. Why would he make someone feel pain? But the experimenter will say, okay, just follow what I'm doing. I'm the experimenter and this is the subject. We have to make sure he learns. So the fake test subject will pretend to not learn. And every time he doesn't get it, he can increase the level of shock. Psychologists were saying they will not increase that shock level. Surprisingly, the majority of subjects went all the way to maximum shock. Why? Because the experimenter said it's okay. So some subjects will dissent. Some will say, oh no, that's painful. But if the experimenter says, it's okay, just fine. This is the experiment. This is what has to happen. Eventually, the subject will administer the shock. So this was very shocking. This was happened in 1960. Later on in the next slide, the Stanford prison experiment happened. because Zimbardo now wanted to realize, wait, were these people evil? Or did the situation help them to be evil, to administer those shocks? So the Stanford Prison Experiment is not just a movie. It happened in 1971. Certain college kids were brought to the prison setting. Some of them were prisoners. Some of them were the jailers or the wardens. And what happened was, at night, some of them became brutal. They abused their power. If you look this up online, there are a lot of videos on this. I won't go into detail, but it's very horrific because they ended up doing things they normally wouldn't do. Now, in the prison setting, you can say, well, these are more aggressive people. They chose young boys who perhaps had too much testosterone. The thing is, the situation still enabled them to do bad. And even Zimbardo, in that experiment, felt himself going on with the things that were happening. It was only when his girlfriend called him out that he realized, oh no, something bad is happening here. This is not good. And that's when he closed the experiment, stopped it. And this was repeated in 2004 during Abu Ghraib in the US, when the US reserves started torturing the prisoners. And why it happened? Because it happened during the night shift. There was no one guarding them, and it happened over 3 months. So what allowed it to happen, right? Perhaps some of them were bad apples. Perhaps they were they were in a bad barrel, but I guess underlying that is the systemic influence. They were not being guarded. They were allowed to be treated that way. They already felt that these Iraqi prisoners were bad people. They were dehumanized. So that allowed the evil to happen. So if we move on to the next slide, what do we do? Right? According to Zimbardo, we can engage in everyday heroism. And he came up with this project for children, for the educational system, that's still widely used now, because now you teach children to be proactive agents for change, to not be bystanders. If they see something they don't like happening, call it out. Just ask. I mean, you don't have to say that's bad. You can say, oh, but why? Why do we have to do that? You know, sometimes a question such as that allows others to also take stock na, wait, tama pa ba itong ginagawa natin? They encourage children and people to be to be heroes in waiting. In that sense, just sort of imagining yourself, what can I do to help? What can I do if I want to be a hero? Because it's when you're a hero, you're basically a normal, regular person, but you give up your egocentrism, your sense of self, and become more pro-social. And then lastly, stand up and speak out. If you notice now, going back to US politics, I guess because it's everywhere, certain Republicans from the Trump party are standing out and speaking out about their experience. And like once certain people started doing this, now more people are speaking up. Sometimes you really need people to speak up and talk about it. Just bring it out to light instead of hiding it under there. So I think that's it. There's a last slide that says that, you know, if people feel safe, their ability to grow and change becomes infinite. And I think we can apply that to a societal level as well. If all of us feel safe, imagine the good that we can do. That's it. I'm sorry. I think I extended a bit, but I hope you guys got something out of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Joey. As meaningful and as insightful as ever.
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Joey, for that webinar, for that talk. No, I'm sure our viewers learned so much from it. I just want to comment. No, what's something that struck me. Early in your talk, you talked about being compassionate to others and being self-compassionate, and I think many of us feel that it's more important to be giving to others than to yourself. And personally, I was able to connect with one of your bullet points, no? The feeling that the needs of others are more important than your own. Like when I was sick a few days ago, I was saying, I was sad, I was bothered, but I keep telling myself, people are in much worse situations than I am. So why must my problems right now matter, no? And if we keep thinking that way, we don't become self-compassionate. We always focus on other people. At there will come a point na mauubusan din tayo.
Mm.
'Di ba? Being giving to others must begin with yourself, no? in order not to run out of things to give. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, Miss Joey. That's something that I have to keep reminding myself of, no? And that we must always be courageous to stand up for what's right, no? So
Yeah.
thank you, Miss Joey.
Okay. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Joey. And yes, Jello, I agree. Be kind to yourself. I think I think that's one of the things I also appreciated about what Joey talked about when it came to um, compassion. Because there is, there really has to be a balance between self-centeredness, right? And compassion, and at the same time, selflessness also. Because I think that's kind of where you were treading. Na parang, it's always about the other people, but you have to take care of yourself. Because if you aren't kind to yourself, if you're not compassionate to yourself, you're right. You won't have, let's say, the ability to care for other people. So that's actually a lot of what they say about I don't know, for the parents who are here, they say that's how it is with parenthood and that's how it is with marriage, right? So they're always saying that they say that well, it used to be people would say like kids are always the priority. Kids are number one. Kids are top one. Parang, never mind if your marriage fails as long as you prioritize your kids. But that's actually not the case, right? Of course, we love our children. We give our lives for our children. But if you don't um, like take care of yourself and you don't take care of your spouse, you're setting up a bad model for your children also. Diba? It's like when you're in an airplane and the altitude drops, remember, and then the oxygen masks come on. Diba? What do they say? You have to put the oxygen on yourself first before you put it on your kid,
Right.
right? Because if you faint, nobody's gonna give your kid the oxygen. So I guess it's kind of like how we can be self-compassionate, na Joe.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, even with moms now, and I think with online, they always call out mothers for not parenting well enough, or they're.
Right?
But
Mm.
it's difficult. I think it's difficult when you think about it. Being a mom is takes its toll, and you always have to. I think I'm not a mother, but I've been around several of them. I know you're one, and you really have to remind yourself, na, yeah, I matter too. My child matters, but I matter too, and no one's perfect, right? No one gets it right all the time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Miss
So,
Chico.
Um,
I believe we have panelists with us, no? Can our
yes.
fellow panelists please show themselves on video?
Okay.
Good
okay.
morning,
While
everyone.
waiting for the panelists to come out, there's another point that I kind of wanted to make that super struck me when Joe was talking about compassion and how there are underlying social factors that are at the root of that, um, at the root of sometimes people not uh, either not being empathic or that draw them to kind of want to help other people. There are a lot of social injustices there. And I super appreciated that because when you see it in line with our business, diba? What is our mission, Jello, diba, panelists? Diba? It's always about addressing homelessness.
Right.
That's actually an underlying factor on why people's self-worth or there are so many parang ill feelings because at the end of the day that's what do you call that, that's a very basic need to have shelter,
Yes.
right? So by doing what we do and by doing what we do excellently every day, no matter what department we're in, I just hope that people understand that wherever you are in this company, you may not be a frontliner, you may not be on the ground, you may not actually be constructing houses, you may be in a desk job, you may be in a creative job. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is enabling those who do that, those who construct, right? Those who teach, um, who give the lessons, who run help. You enable them to help those who are already in that situation, and we're helping them get out. We may not be successful maybe half the time. Not everybody who attends help is able to get a home. But the mere fact that you're equipping them with the knowledge of how to possibly plan for the future and plan their finances, that helps also um, address that injustice.
Yeah. Nice. Good point.
So, how about yan? Sina Mark, James, Jam, Roland. What are your what are your thoughts on Miss Joey's excellent talk today?
Who's first?
Okay, Sir Roland, you can go first, Sir Roland.
Okay. So, well, I'm glad the passion, no, magic words that you're discussing situation. Being as part of the team, our department is property management. So I correlate the dose of compassion because from the start, we are in the helping to deliver units, the homeless, all the complaints in the ground that we're doing to assist. So science, three words is responsibility, accountability, commitment. That have siguro we're glad because we are here as a participant team. Now, I connect lang the part of our work. Ando na yung compassion, hindi na minsan alam na this part na yun na pa yun. We experience a lot of yung barriers din na kami because of the religion of the universe. They totally erase, mga erase na yan eh. So science because the day of the verb. As goes by, we are there na to complete the mandate as part of the logistic company, the developer. So siguro, what we can now, part of investment or as part of the management is we committed their safety, of course, the safety of the home that we are now giving for the turnover. This is, kumbaga, dream they come, yung mga naandun lang na mga dream nila, and the part, we're part of to be yung maging totoo na yon sila. So siguro yung part of that, no. I'm happy for the word magic word compassion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Roland. Sir Roland is part of the property development unit, no? And you are,
Yes,
sir,
right.
are a property manager, right, sir?
Yes,
Social
property
housing.
managers and the socialized, the economic socialized. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Sir Roland. Now, I guess, who'd like to go next? Okay, hi, Sir James.
Yes.
Hi, sir. Good morning. Miss Chica,
Morning.
good morning.
So, Sir James, where are you from? What's your unit and what's your position, sir?
Treasury Management Officer, Treasury Management Department po after po ng under po ng finance.
Okay.
So, yun po. So, what strikes me yung sa sinabi kanina is yung meaning ng being compassion. It is being sensitive to the suffering of others. So, kasi pag hindi mo naiintindihan o hindi ka sensitive dun sa mga paghihirap ng mga kasama mo, parang wala kang pakialam. So, yun yung talagang tumatak sa akin. So, ngayon, paano siya nangyayari sa work ko? Actually, hindi naman sa work as Treasury Management Officer. It's being yung pagpapasok natin pag umaga and pag-uuwi natin from pupuntang office, then going back home. One day kasi si admin tumawag sa akin, sabi niya, "Sir, pwede ko bang isabay yung dalawang employees na pagpasok and pauwi?" So ako, I know the struggle. Wala silang masakyan during ng GCQ pa yun eh. During ng GCQ, wala silang masakyan. So, ang thinking ko is pwede naman. Kaya lang, inisip mo rin yung safety mo kasi syempre, lumalabas sila, hindi mo naman alam kung saan sila pumupunta. Pero dahil nga mas naiintindihan ko yung struggle nila, mas pinili ko pa rin na isabay ko sila without hesitation. So, parang dun din papasok yung sinasabi kanina na the more compassionate you are, the more human you can feel. So parang mas masarap para sa atin yung nakakatulong tayo sa ibang tao. Then, parang parang sa kagaan ng loob natin. So yung huli pang nag-struck sa akin is yung safety requires solidarity. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. So naisip ko rin doon, yung ginawa kong yon, na kung hahayaan ko sila magbiyahe or sumakay sa public transportation, maaring mas prone sila sa magkaroon ng virus. So ay kasama ko sila sa work. So mas magiging vulnerable kami sa virus kung lalabas pa sila. So mas parang tama naman yung inisip ko na sa akin na lang sila sumabay para at least safe kami lahat na magkaroon ng virus. So yun yung sa akin. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir James. So, Ms. Joey, what are your thoughts on Sir James's insights?
Yeah. Actually, like with Sir Roland and Sir James, no, parang how they related it to their work then, and basically the good that you do, providing homes is a basic necessity, and then now just extending that to your colleagues as well, na parang putting them first, and then at the same time also I'm thinking you also considered your own safety, you factored in your own safety when you offer them the ride, diba? Parang hindi lang magbe-benefits sa sayo, sa company, but sa kanila din. So, there's a win-win situation talaga, diba? And I guess it's a compassionate. That's what we can do to extend compassion. How does it make you feel, Sir James?
Actually, mas magaan sa loob mo na isasabihin mo sila, papasok tsaka pauwi. Parang masaya sila eh. Pag parang yung saya nila, nahahawa ka rin. Masaya sila kasi mas safe sila nakakapasok tsaka nakakauwi. So ikaw, ganun ka rin feeling mo. So ang iniisip ko na lang, yung tungkol dun sa safety nung sa amin, is yung practice na kami nung mga minimum health protocols na sinasabi sa atin. So yun lang ma'am. So masaya naman po. And self-fulfilling na katulong naman po.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you po, Miss Jo.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we hear now from Sir Mark? Good morning, Sir Mark.
Morning, everyone.
So, Sir Mark, can you please explain what unit you're from and what you do in JNG?
So I belong with the supply management group. I am the procurement head for the procurement functionality, wherein we purchase all materials required for construction and non-construction requirements by the JNG group. What struck me the most with what Joey was saying earlier was when she was presenting the compassion, wherein if she says it's a call to care, and then there's one portion there wherein it says compassionate leaders earn their staff's trust and support and have more authentic connections with them, leading to positive changes. So this one, what I've seen is, let's say for example, from the management's perspective, they were very compassionate, wherein they wanted to take care of all the staffs and ensure people who come into the office are safeguarded, or there are extensive protocols provided, disinfections, face masks, alcohols, rapid tests, all of these were put in place. So if you ask employees who comes into work daily on a daily basis to the office, majority, I would say at a 90% rate, would tell you that they feel safe because of the compassion showed by the company, and because of all these precautionary measures being provided. When we provide them this, we don't expect employees to stretch and work, but you can see some employees even extended up to late evenings working because they stay in the hotel already for safety precautionary measures. So you could see them really working hard to help out on the company struggle. So these are situations wherein you don't not just we or the top management asking them to work hard for it, but you can see it directly from them stretching on their own trying to give back what they can to the company who showed care for them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So it's that, no? It's a byproduct, sir. What you saw, right? It wasn't
Yes.
really the intention. It was more to provide safety. But when people feel safe, they have more. They have more to give. They're more able to work. So thank you for that example, po. Yeah.
Thank you, Sir Mark. No, and I think we have one more. Hi, Jam. Good morning. So, please let us know what unit you're from and what you do in the JNG, please.
Hello, good morning. I'm Jam. I'm a project assistant from Joy Nostalg Foundation. So, what struck me the most is compassion is not just feeling empathy towards other, but also having motivation to do something about it or to do something about their situation. So, in another is that it is also important for us to feel self-compassion, because when we do, we will have a better understanding of ourselves, and then we could connect to others and feel more compassion about them, to them. So, another, I realize na kapag patuloy tayong nagpapakita ng compassion sa iba, um, makiki, um, pwedeng mahawaan, or I mean mahawaan, ma-encourage natin yung iba na ipakita din yung compassion nila. So, yun lang po yung para sa akin.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's not just a flow of compassion with yourself, no, it's also sa community. Compassion engenders compassion. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you po.
Nice.
All right, so hold on. Okay, wait. We have a comment here from Jack Bassett. No, compassionate leadership is very striking to me. To me, it is a basic life and management skill. It is more productive if we feel and understand that our team members have basic needs as well. And if these basic needs like safety, security, and shelter are not provided or addressed, that is when situations can be very counterproductive. Kaya, kaya, kaya maliit at routine man, malaking bagay if we constantly check on our people.
Yes.
A simple show of care can go a long way. Thank you, Jack, for that very good insight on compassionate leadership.
Yeah.
With that also, I just wanted to highlight one point that we didn't really touch on so much, but I was very, very struck by it, and I think it's something that is worth bringing to the forefront now. When Joey talked about the evil, the psychology of evil, I felt that was fantastic that she did that. No, it's a delicate topic. I'm sure all of us probably have a lot to say about it. There are certain things that struck me, so I'll just run quickly through it now. One person, diba? To get people out of that parang not having it only takes one person to do something to help alleviate someone else's situation, right? You remember how when Joey was talking about, because we kind of share the responsibility, it's either we're all hesitant to do something. So if you see that there's like an injustice being done out there and there are so many of us around it and we don't speak up or we don't say anything or we allow for it to happen, then we're not being compassionate. We don't act on our compassion. Yeah. I think that's one thing that's also very clear about compassion. It's not sympathy. It's not saying, ay, kawawa naman siya. There's like, with compassion kasi there's also an element of wanting to do something and actually doing something about it. Part of that is we shouldn't also feel like, oh, there are others out there who will help, so I don't really have to say anything. I won't ruffle feathers because, I'm only like what, 10%, right, Joe? That won't act on it. So I think it's very important. And the second is there's also the group thinking. We also, I guess, in a way, we also have to be careful with who we surround ourselves with, diba? Because let's say, even if we're not inherently, diba? Even if we're not evil, we're not predisposed to evil, the kind of company that we keep also will have an effect on our actions, or the kind of, parang, it's like, let's say, you're a negative person and you surround yourself with negative people, then you're just gonna be totally negative, and that's not going to be productive, and that's also not showing ourselves kindness or compassion. um, so I just wanted to say, Joe, I'm really glad you provided us with the slides, because this is really going to be useful for the people who may not have been able to join us this morning. And of course, we'll be posting this on our YouTube. So guys, please uh, wait for that link. If you did not get the chance to join us this morning, please, I really hope that they will click on it, because this was a very, very good discussion. So, does anyone else have words to say? Anything else? Jalo?
Or maybe questions?
Yeah. How about from our audience? No, no question. You can still post in the chat box.
If you have pahabol questions, you could also post them in the community Viber group, and I will send them to Miss Joey, no, for her insights.
Okay. That's awesome. All right. So
Right.
it is now 10:15. So on behalf of the Wellness Wednesday, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And of course, thank you so much to Joe, who always has beautiful slides and always has a lot of interesting things to say. So thank you very much for imparting this knowledge with Joy Nostalg for Wellness Wednesday. Thank you again to all the panelists, all the sharers who have joined us, to Mark, James, Jam, Roland. Thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate every single thing. And of course, thank you, Jella, for joining again.
Glad to be here. Very happy to be here. Thank you all for your support and prayers. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I'll see you all once again in the next webinar. So till then, stay safe, everyone, and have a joyful day ahead. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.